Alright, these are some of the items that we're going to be needing. We need some valve grinding compound. That's when we do our lapping. We're going to need some gasket maker. We're going to need some grease. We're going to need some motor oil. And this is our Briggs & Stratton gasket engine set. It's part number 590777. This is what's in it. It's cheaper to buy the set than it is the individual gaskets. This cost me just under $14, including tax. Let's see here. We've got the sump cover gasket, the head gasket, an O-ring for the oil filter, a muffler gasket, our crankcase breather gasket. This is our, we're not going to be installing this, I didn't remove it. This is for our intake valve guide bushing. And we should be able to put this together now. The first thing that we want to do, we want to look at our crankcase and see if we have any scoring in the cylinder. Anything where carbon had broken off of the head and the piston had scraped it along the bore. And this feels really smooth, actually. Now we're going to remove our piston rings. And the way to do this, there's a special tool. We don't have it. But if you're careful, you can do this without distorting it. Just lift up the one ring and then spin it right out. And it'll come out just like that. Okay? What we need to do now is establish if this ring is worn too much. The more the ring is worn, the greater this gap here is going to be. And the way we're going to test that is simply put it into our cylinder bore. Okay. And they want us to, we're going to square it up with our piston head, just like this. Okay. And they want us to check it at about 1 inch into our bore. And that gap right there has to be below 35 thousandths, and it absolutely is. And the oil ring has to be under 45 thousandths. Okay? But just put your ring in there, square it up with your piston head, and place it approximately 1 inch from the top. And that's how you measure your wear on your piston rings. The next part of this job, we have to lap the valves. And I have right here the exhaust valve, which is the smaller of the two. And all they want us to do is put a finish or a mirror finish on this seat right here, the seat of the valve and the face of the valve. And the way that we do that is by using grinding compound for our valves. Okay. Just pull a little out. You don't need a lot of this. It's a gritty material. And just a couple of dabs will do it. Okay. And then place it into our exhaust port, like so. And taking our valve lapper, press down and it'll create a suction. And what we're going to do is just turn this crank, and if you notice, it just goes back and forth. It doesn't make complete revolutions. And we're just trying to make this a mirror finish so that it'll seat better. Every so often, just lift it up and turn it a little bit. And I would do this for about 2 minutes and then go to the next one. All right, after you've lapped your valve, take it out, wipe it down. You have to make sure you get all that gritty compound out of there. because it's an abrasive material. And all we're trying to do is polish it a little bit so the two surfaces will mate really well. And once you've done the exhaust, do the exact same thing for the intake. Doesn't take a lot of pressure. It's time now to reinstall our piston rings, and we have three different types. The first one, the one that goes in the very top groove, is called our compression ring. Our second one is our wiper ring, and then this one, which goes on the very bottom, is what we're going to install first here, is our oil ring. And each one has a gap, okay? And we want to make sure that our gaps don't line up. So I'm going to put this one facing this way, this one facing this way, and this one facing straight down, okay? And the first one that I'm going to install is going to be this coiled one. And just carefully walk it around like so. Okay? And then this one has to go on the bottom of it, and that one goes on the top of it, all in the same groove. So we're going to do a third and a third. So the oil ring will be ending right here. We'll have the wiper ring end here, and maybe this one end right here, the compression ring. Like so. Okay. And the other one I want to end maybe right here. Now remember, I hear a lot of talk about where these rings are supposed to be lining up. You just don't want them all to be straight down because you'll lose compression. But these rings actually spin around, and because the engine goes so fast, you really don't lose compression, and they will eventually work their way out of that alignment. But I don't hear too much about that being said. All right. The next thing we're going to do is install our valves. And using our spring compressor, we want to make sure that we have our keyway lined up straight out of that hole. Okay. And then we just stick our valve in there. Get in that keyway. And then release it. We don't have a honing tool yet, so this engine we're not going to hone it. But if you were to hone this, use diesel fuel or kerosene because it won't gum up your stones, and put it into your drill and just go back and forth, and it'll put hatch marks in your cylinder, and it'll help seat your rings and bring the oil up out of the crankcase for you. Like I said, I don't own one, so we're going to skip that for a moment. Next, we're going to apply a liberal amount of oil to our bore and the outside of our piston, and we're going to use a ring compressor to put our piston into the bore. I'm using a Briggs part number 19070 for the ring compressor. The only other thing that you need to know about is that there's a mark on the top of our piston right here, and you want that to point toward the magneto, or it's the same thing, or our intake valve, and that would be right here. This is where our magneto goes. This is our intake valve, so we want it pointing that way. You don't want it too tight. You want to make sure that you can still get your piston out of this. But if you feel any resistance, go ahead and stop, because you want to make sure that you're not putting too much tension on your rings. Okay. And remember, when you put this on, you want to make sure that it matches your scratches. Using the handle of a hammer, just kind of just like so. All right. That was easy enough. Next, we're going to be installing our crankshaft, and what you want to do is put a little bit of bearing grease, okay, in this journal right here. Not a lot, but it'll hold the parts together. And what's nice about using bearing grease is when it gets hot, it'll melt away, but it'll give us a starting point without having metal on metal until the oil slinger can get the oil into these little parts. And we want to put a little grease here. And we want to put a little grease here also. And just slide it in, just like that. Okay. If you remember, I showed you earlier, put a witness mark and your witness mark and line them up. And it has two 5/16" bolts. And the specs on this are 100 torque pounds per inch. Put a little bit of grease on this too. And on the other side of that connecting rod. Okay. All right, continuing on, we're going to take our crankshaft gear with this little knob right here, and it's going to go right in that little groove right there. So it's going to go down like that. And don't forget our small thin washer. Okay. And then we're going to take our two tappets, and when I took this engine apart, they fell out, so I'm not sure which was the intake and which was the exhaust. But if you remember, put the intake with the intake and the exhaust with the exhaust. And that just slips right in those holes, like so. Okay. And then taking our camshaft, put a little grease right here. Again, not a lot, it's just to keep metal from being on metal. And as this gets hot, the grease will melt. Now on this crankshaft gear, there's a dot right here. We need to line that dot up with this timing mark on the camshaft, and you'll see that in a moment. A little bit more grease, go ahead and put it right on that end of that camshaft like that. Okay, and then put our slinger on. It'll go just like so. Okay. The next thing that we're going to do is put our sump cover on. So we need to break into our gasket kit and put it on like so. Now I'm going to put a little bit of grease on the crankshaft, and I'm going to put gasket sealer on the sump cover. Now if you have a question which side, if you're going to put gasket sealer on, the gasket sealer will go on the side of the gasket that's going to be the part removed. So we're going to be removing the sump cover, so the gasket sealer will go on this part, not the crankcase. I'm also going to put just a little bit of grease inside this right here. Okay, we're ready for assembly. There you go. All right, there's 6 3/8-inch bolts that are going to go into our sump cover, and they're torqued at 85 inch-pounds. Just put them in. Just do a zigzag pattern and go lightly your first pass, your second pass, and then we're going to torque it down to 85 inch-pounds. All right, now we're going to be putting on our head, and it's 8 half-inch bolts, and we're going to be torquing it down to 140 inch-pounds. And again, make sure that your head and the top of the crankcase is clean of oil. We don't want any contamination. And when we put this on, we're just going to loosely tighten everything. Then when we go to use our torque wrench, we're going to go in a cross pattern so that we don't distort or warp our head. Simple enough. Line up our holes in our gasket and put it together. Don't forget the top 3 head bolts hold our governor springs. We're going to be installing our seals now, and we have our 2 new seals that came with our kit. And there's a slight trick. When you install your seal, you want to make sure that there's no burrs on these keyways. And what they like to do is take a small piece of masking tape, just put it over it like that, because a lot of times when you put your seal in, it'll rip and it'll immediately leak because of that burr. So let's just fit that right over this, like so. And taking a 1-inch PVC pipe and a rubber mallet, just seat that evenly. Just like that. And then remove your tape. Okay, let's do the other side on a sump. And you want to make sure that this part goes into the engine. All right, now we're going to install our flywheel. And remember our key, and our crankshaft has this keyway here, and our flywheel has a keyway here. And this is our key, and this is what does our mechanical timing. So just line up your keyways, put in your key, like so. And the specs on the torque is 55 foot-pounds. Let's put our... Actually, we can install our cup now also. This is our starter cup. And sometimes there's a bump on the bottom that has to go in one of these holes. This one doesn't have it, so just put it in there like so. And torque that down to 55 foot-pounds. All right, our crankcase breather cover has 2 1/4-inch bolts that we're going to put in right now. We have 2 1/4-inch bolts on our pickup tube for our carburetor, and that goes right here. And again, a new gasket. So let me install that real fast. It goes just like so. And that goes just like so. All right, let's install our carburetor now. And we have this pickup tube or return tube from the crankcase breather cover. Remember? This is the one that takes the unspent gases and puts them back into the carburetor. That just threads in right here, like so. Like that. Now, in your carburetor, you're going to have an O-ring and a retaining ring. Make sure that those are in place. Okay. Okay. They snap in. And that's going to go onto this tube right here that we just installed a little bit ago. And don't forget our governor springs. And that just fits into our throttle plate like so. Then slide it across that pipe. And then we use our boot to reconnect this pipe to the carburetor. That's our return. Unspent fuel goes up that tube and back into the carburetor. All right, now don't forget our retaining spacer that goes between the gas tank and the carburetor right here. And that's a 1/2-inch bolt. Before you tighten it down, put this one back in place. It's 3/8. All right, the carburetor's installed. All right, I want to install the magneto now and its weather vane. What holds this in place are 2 grooves right here, and they're 1/4-inch bolts. And you want to make sure that the magnet isn't in front of this right at the moment. We're going to put it to the side. There's the magnet. We're going to put it right here. And we're going to get this weather vane hooked up into our governor springs right here. See that little hook? Goes just like so and like so. And then we're just going to install this loose, not tight yet, and then we're going to gap it. I'll show you how to do that in a moment. All the way back. The way we gap this, we just take an old business card and put it in between the flywheel and the magneto. Like so. And then turn the flywheel until the magnets pull the coil forward. Okay, and that'll be the proper gap that we need. Go ahead and tighten it down. That's all there is to it. Remove your business card, and it's properly gapped. All right, let's put in our muffler, and that just screws in right here. I wouldn't over tighten it. There you go. And our dipstick. We'll add the oil when we put it on the mower deck. Let's put on our brake system now, and that's two 5/16 inch bolts. And that just simply goes like so. Simple enough. And because there's a big spring on this, I wouldn't tighten this one too tight until you get this bolt lined up. And that's all there is to it. All right, we're ready for our blower housing, and it's just 3 3/8 inch bolts. And the only tricky part is make sure that you don't pinch your coil spark plug wire. See how it has a notch right here? You don't want to short that out, just like so. That's all there is to it. Let's put on our air filter. And let's install our spark plug. She's ready to go onto the mower deck. Let's do that next. Well, we finally did it. We've got our motor all together, and we're going to install it with 3 1/2-inch bolts onto our deck. If you remember, our deck wasn't very good, but it's what we have. So just simply pick it up, put your holes on it, and I'm going to use a blue thread locker just to make sure that they don't work their way back out. Then we're going to install the mower blade, fill it with oil, put a little gas into it, put our handle and our brake cable on, and we're going to start this up. We're going to see how it works. Okay, I'll catch you when we're starting it. Well, here it is, all back together. Let's see how it does. No promises. Let's see. Oh! I'll catch you on the next one.